I've entitled this little talk, Good Grief, What We Lose by Not Honoring Spiritual Needs and Interest. If I told most community providers that there was a generic community-based natural support organization that offers socialization opportunities, recreation, lifelong learning, opportunities to contribute in socially valued ways, increased chances to make friends in an intergenerational environment, support in times of loss and struggle and illness, and possibilities of respite care for families and caregivers, assistance with employment, and occasional financial assistance. And if I told you that they don't charge fees for those services and supports, that they are a largely untapped resource that has a mission statement, that have mission statements that already support inclusion, even if they don't know, even if they haven't done much in that area, and that there are more than 400,000 of them around the country, you might say, where? Who? Let me at them. You might wonder what in God's name I was talking about. Well, exactly that. I'm talking about faith communities and spiritual communities around the country, and organizations where somewhere, some of those synagogues, temples, or mosques are doing some or every one of those kinds of activities, which I just mentioned, for and with people with disabilities and their families. And that there's a growing interest, awareness, and resources and skills in faith communities in working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. But what needs to happen for provider organizations and networks? What needs to happen is for provider networks and organizations to pay attention, serious attention, intentional attention to the wishes, traditions, and choices related to spiritual supports for the people they support and serve in this area of life. It's more than a box to be ticked off, as they say in the UK, to be filled in by a denomination or a faith tradition. What do I mean by spirituality? I use a kind of twofold definition. The spirituality is whatever someone's sense or understanding of holy is, and what are the core values and that drive someone's life, the things that they come back to over and over again about what are their core values. You can also look at spirituality as connection, and connection in terms of connection to self, to others, to place. What are places that are sacred for you or spiritual places? To time. Many cultures besides the American culture have a much more sense of connection to ancestors or to future than some of us do. And also connection to that sense of holy, connection to God, however one defines that for themselves. And faith communities are not necessarily those places. Those kinds of feelings and that spirituality defined in that way, it could be somebody who's a fanatic Baltimore Orioles fan. Going to a game at the Baltimore Orioles may be the most spiritual thing that they do. But faith communities and religious communities, of course, are a huge resource in this area. Spiritual questions are also at the heart of the values that permeate the developmental disability service system. We talk about the core 4 values: independence, productivity, inclusion, and self-determination. Those are all American answers to fundamental spiritual questions. Independence, who am I? Who am I to be as a person? And we think in this country we're all supposed to be independent, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and that there may be questionable things about that definition in our worship of independence, because none of us really are, but that's a value in the service system because of services and supports in the past that saw people as only dependent. Productivity, we answer that in terms of who are you? You tell somebody my name, what do you do? What's your job? What's my purpose in life? What do I do that makes a contribution to the society, to the community that I live in? So what's my sense of calling? Where do I know that What was I put here to do? What am I making some kind of contribution? Inclusion, one could say the question underneath all that is not who am I, but whose am I? Who do I belong to? In the South, we would say, who are your people? Who are the people that are connected to you in your lives? And all of us in service systems know and have seen the relationship maps that have with the person at the core of that and maybe some family and staff close by, and then other services that they engage for their supports on the outside, but very little in that middle group of people who are friends and people who connect with people on a regular basis. Common response often, and self-determination is also kind of just what we talk about and are beginning to talk about even more, is how do people have a sense of control and choice in their lives? People at all levels of ability. And how can I impact what happens to me even if I have a pretty severe or have profound support needs? Because people who know them well know that they have preferences, know that they have choices, they have things they like and they don't like. How do we honor that? And that question of what kind of control do I have as a person? So who am I, why am I, whose am I, what kind of control do I have? All sort of ultimate questions of spirituality that we deal with. The common response for many community providers is we can't touch it. It's a state church matter. We get funding from states and federal government, and so we're not allowed to touch spirituality. That's false. You can talk about spirituality, you can honor it, you just can't proselytize for good reason, because that's coercive. But you can certainly honor, listen, respect someone's spirituality, their wishes, their traditions, and their choices. We say spiritual or religious participation is a right. Sometimes you see them on their Bill of Rights in the hallways and on the walls of group homes, but it's a right that's often observed more by its absence than in practice. We cannot say, as service providers and supporters, that we are culturally competent, that we're committed to self-determination, or that we are especially really person-centered if we don't take a look at the area of spirituality and what people's wishes and needs are in those areas and begin to honor those. We're people from different cultures. Faith and spirituality is often at the heart of those different cultural backgrounds. You talk in self-determination. This is my choice. No matter what I may think as a staff person, this is what I would like. And person-centered planning. Ultimately, this is about taking what we believe in good person-centered planning and making something happen from those person-centered plans rather than just having it on paper. You can't proselytize, but you can. You can do all kinds of other things. And sometimes agencies have said to me, well, we don't have the capacity. We don't have the capacity. We don't have enough staff to help people do this on the weekend. And one of the things I've been thinking about lately is who says it needs to start with the direct support staff? In fact, if it's one of the most important areas and has all the potential that I mentioned earlier, maybe it needs to start with administration and professionals and begin to be the helpers and the initiators of the kinds of relationships and model the very kind of coaching and guiding that direct support professionals can then learn from as they move out and help people get connected to congregations in the community. We wouldn't go to a community business first of all. Who goes first to a community business or to a chamber of commerce or to the YMCA? It's not usually done by a direct support professional taking somebody without any kind of warning or preparation ahead of time. We wouldn't dare do that usually. And so what agencies really need to look at are who are the best community builders you've got. Maybe does everybody in the agency see themselves as a community builder? And in this area, this might be particularly effective because if you find somebody who's Roman Catholic and grew up in a Roman Catholic tradition and really would like it to go back to Mass and has a couple of different interests and immediate team or the providers or the DSPs are not Roman Catholic, then somebody in your agency is going to be Roman Catholic. And it's the 6 degrees of separation, even 1 or 2. Who do you know who's Catholic? And who are the places and who are the churches or parishes in the area who might be really receptive? And who do you know that we could go to talk to? So in that sense, everybody in the agency becomes a community builder and potentially a guide or a resource for helping people become involved. Professional staff model and train community building skills. And so how will direct support professionals learn that unless they see other people doing it, modeling that? And what's even more important, I think, these days is that so many direct support professionals come from other cultures and other countries and are trying to figure out who they are in this community of America or in the specific communities in which they work and what it means to be part of that particular community. Faith communities also are the biggest source of revenues and contributions in this country, the biggest source of volunteers, the community places where most community leaders meet one way or the other or belong to, full of employers and employees. Think about any congregation that's full of employers or employees, and support organizations, particularly in times of grief and loss or transition or death, which most agencies don't handle very well. They're beginning to, people are beginning to deal with that more effectively, but think about the importance of building connections and relationships and people being included, so when those times come, when someone's mom dies or dad dies or a sibling dies or something happens, an unexpected death at your agency, you don't have to call for the professional grief counselor somewhere. You know a pastor or a priest or a rabbi who can come and respond in appropriate ways. The saddest call I used to get at the university, at the UCED where I worked, was people who would sometimes call and say, Bill, someone just died at our home, could you come help? And I could come help because I've done a lot of that in my career, but I'm a stranger walking into that situation. People don't know me. And who do all of us call or want to show up in a situation where something like that's happened? You won't want strangers. You want people you know. You want your friends. You want people you've got connections to. So if we do it right, I think, and people do it right, people in congregations will begin to see the care and commitment that staff and agencies have to the people they're assisting at first to be able to come to that congregation. They may not talk to you about it, but they're going to see it, and that's going to be impressive. It depends upon the capacity of the people coming with somebody initially to talk to people, to help people know the story of the person who they're bringing. And it's also potentially a place where those communities can get to know the person who's bringing somebody you're assisting, like a direct support professional, who may have support. There may be ways in which a faith community can support that person as well if they want to do that. If people are just sent by the vanful or dropped off on Sunday morning or Saturday morning or Friday without introductions, without planning, without supports, you get the same response as you would get if you did the same thing at a business or a YMCA. But it can be going out to be parts of faith communities and building those relationships is more than a, quote, community outing. It's an opportunity to really become part of a community where people can move towards real membership and a sense of identity and a sense of belonging, that this is my community, this is my place, in addition to the agency where I support, who supports me, and other places that I've come from in my past. If you're lucky, you may find a faith community who's willing to do this right off the bat and ask after a while, when you don't show up one Sunday or Saturday, where were you? We missed you, which is the outcome question that you would want to know. We missed you shows that somebody belongs, that people were missed. And you will say, well, we didn't have enough staff on this particular day to send somebody. And they say, Well, we could do that. If you don't mind, look, we got several people who drive right by that home or in that area. Could they stop by and pick them up and bring them with? And most agencies would say, sorry, we can't do that because our policies and procedures won't let that happen. And then we in the provider world who say we believe in natural community supports and community inclusion are in trouble in terms of being able to practice and to do what it means in communities to become parts of the community. The barriers may not be so much out there as we think they are as they are within here, within our own agencies, policies, and practices. So how can this happen? Build spiritual supports into policies and to practices from the top down. Work on it one by one. Don't do as I did earlier in my career, going with a group of volunteers en masse to mass. So you send a whole group of people at one time. You want people to get to know people individually and for who they are. You can do good spiritual assessments fairly simply, and there are a number of ways of doing that now that people are using with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But good person-centered planning will pick it up. Not just about what faith are you, but when do you go? What do you like to do when you go? What would you like to do? Not what do you like to do now, but what would you like to do more of? Oh, I'd like to become an usher. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Then you begin to hear some of the dreams that people have in that area of service. The introductions shouldn't be on Saturday and Sunday. They ought to be beforehand. And in fact, the visits ought to be, the orientation ought to be before going to a church on Sunday morning for the first time. So people know the environment, know where the bathrooms are, know a little bit about the culture of that particular congregation, because every congregation has got what people in the autism world call a hidden curriculum. There are rules there that aren't explicit, and it's often the person who's a stranger who doesn't have the sense to see those rules and understand them quickly who may do things that get in the way of people really being included. Build those relationships with somebody at that faith community before you actually begin. Invite them over to come meet the person in their house as well, or where they live, or in their supported apartment. And help build a team of people at the congregation who might be willing to be a small circle of support who would help support that person. Why? More than one person? Why? Because not everybody goes to church or synagogue every week. And build a small team and build that around somebody's interest. So go back to our example. If it's in Maryland and you got Baltimore Orioles fans and are also Catholic, well, could you go to that parish and say, we'd like 3 guys who are Baltimore Oriole fans to get to know somebody who really loves the Baltimore Orioles and would love to talk about that, and never really gets a chance to talk with anybody about the Baltimore Orioles, and he's also Catholic, and he wants to start coming here. And the guys who are the Baltimore Oriole fans from the congregation are going to say, oh, yeah, we can talk Baltimore Orioles. And the agency and the staff can say, we can help you with the disability stuff, but we don't know Baltimore Orioles, especially if I'm an immigrant. You guys know that, and that would be great. We can both share those kinds of competencies. It also means training for staff in the role of community building, of being a guide, a teacher of others. And it's so important because I've heard so many stories from direct support professionals who end up feeling like if they accompany somebody to a faith community, that they're being asked to believe the same thing. And they're not being asked to believe the same thing. You want them to see themselves as a role of teacher and introducer and guide, and really helping people, that person that you're going with, to get connected to as many people as possible. Not just attending, to get connected so people begin to know somebody's name. And it may mean, for our agency side, being sensitive to which kind of staff are comfortable doing this or which kind just are really uncomfortable, depending upon the faith tradition or that. The most important thing is for that faith community to know somebody by name and hear their story. Not diagnoses, not issues, not person-centered plan, but hear somebody's story, because that's the way we talk about people in faith communities. To go slow, don't expect this to happen at once. Typical people move into a congregation and you don't become a member usually quickly at once. You're testing. People do church shopping. They may need to help people do that. Collaborate with any of the staff and volunteers. Celebrate new connections and friendships, anything that faith community does that really helps that person to begin to feel at home. Make sure they get thanked for that. Make sure they get recognized if they do it well in your company's annual award dinner or organization's award dinner, or just to make sure you celebrate the things that are happening. Celebrate those new connections and friendships. The resources are out there now. There's just a ton of resources about helping people become more involved in congregational life. The members of the AAIDD Religion and Spirituality Division would stand ready to help any agency or provider who would like to pay more attention to this, and we can point you in the direction of resources and ideas. And then finally, take the spirituality of your staff seriously. Doesn't mean take the religion of your staff seriously, but take the spirituality, it could be religion, because that's the source for many of their commitment to caregiving, commitment to helping others, commitment to care, and the source that they come back and draw upon, because you know you can't work in this area without it impacting your values, your spirit, the kinds of questions that you have and who you are. Spirituality can lead, if used well, and to build in commitment and to the values and the connections and the purpose of the organization. Can be used to help renew people's commitment when they're getting burned out. We all know what it's like to work in an organization that has a sick soul, and we all hopefully know what it's like to work in an organization where there's a really good sense of who we are, and people feel supported in the ways that we're asking people to support the people we serve. Your agency could also become the focal point in your community around which a number of different faith groups would gather to begin talking about building and strengthening and expanding inclusive ministries in that community or that region. Your agency in that way is a neutral base in terms of faith communities and a place where people can come to gather. And that kind of task force or interfaith consulting group advisory board can be ambassadors for your provider agency, as well as for helping other faith communities and their traditions get interested in the people that you serve and support. We ask the question in disability services and supports, usually, where do people belong? Most of us would say they belong in community. The real question about belonging is not a question of where, but who. Again, going back to who do you belong to? Who do we all belong to? Who are our people? Where do your passions and strengths and gifts lead to memberships, to places where people know my name, to places where people miss you when you're not there? Who visits you in the hospital or when you're in a tough time? Who helps in the tough times? Not only, we hope, people who are paid to do so as good as those people are. And when you put all that together, there's just huge possibilities here for supports that would impact someone's quality of life in terms of their interests, their gifts, their friendships, and just all kinds of things. So the people we serve and support, are they just served in the community, or are they part of a community, are part of core parts of that community? Spiritual supports can not only open up opportunities for individuals, but can be incredible projects in institutional public relations, in public awareness and education, and ways in which person-centered planning and community inclusion get practiced as well as preached by the service system in which we work. And when that's done well, everyone, individual, staff, agency, family, congregation, everyone wins. Thank you.